What's going on YouTube? Today I bring you a bit of a different video. In fact, actually, I can't find this video on YouTube. If you can, I mean, go ahead, watch it, I guess. But I cannot find a 2002 NFL redraft on YouTube. The only one I even found on Google was a Bleacher Report one done like a year ago. And so I thought it'd be pretty cool to put one up on YouTube and, kind of look at how the draft class from 20 years ago kind of panned out in the NFL, and look at what happened. Were players taken at the right spots? Who should have been taken? So, yeah, we're going to be doing that. And then starting off with the first pick, we have a safety going to the Texans. Now, this draft had a plethora of great pass rushers. In fact, you'll see, I guess spoiler alert, the next three picks are edge rushers. This draft had some crazy edge rushers. And the only other really elite player from this class was Ed Reed, currently the only Hall of Famer from this class, I believe. There might be a couple guys, that certainly might get in. Dwight Freeney might be in. I'm not sure. Julius Peppers should get in sometime soon. There's some great other guys in this, but as far as I know, Ed Reed, and I mean, obviously it's a Google search away, but it's not a big deal. Either way, Ed Reed, he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. So yeah, there's a lot of other great players in this class, but Ed Reed was just on another level when he played for the Ravens. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he would have taken this team from something else, but David Carr just unfortunately was not a good quarterback for the Texans. He just struggled. I do think he would have been better on a better team. It's really difficult to be a good quarterback on an expansion franchise in its first year. And Ed Reed, I'm sure maybe he might not have had as coveted as a career, but I mean, when it comes to the players the teams actually picking the players, Ed Reed to me was the best player of this class, so I feel like he does have to be the first overall pick to the Texans. Moving on to the second pick, the Panthers, in my opinion, actually took the correct player with Julius Peppers, who went on to have a very solid career for the Panthers, did help them reach the Super Bowl at one point, and also had a very nice career with the Bears and Packers as well. When I think of Julius Peppers, I think of the Panthers, and I think they made the right choice. The dude is arguably the best Panther in the team's history and did a lot of great things for that franchise. Up there in sacks all time, just was truly one of those elite players. There's an argument for sure for him to be the number one pick here. It's just, I think, again, I would take Ed Reed over him, and Peppers is still such a great pick, that it was. I think this is actually the only pick in the entire draft that I have being repeated. There might be one other. Just because Julius Peppers, again, just was that good, in my opinion, it was the right pick for the Panthers. Moving on to the third pick, the Lions are going to move from Joey Harrington to Dwight Freeney. And, with Harrington, he was just a straight-up bust. I don't even think it's a situation like Carr where maybe if he was on a different team, he would have been better. Joey Harrington was just a bad quarterback. Threw more interceptions in his career than touchdowns. He only won 18 games in his 4 years in Detroit. He just was not a good quarterback. And getting a guy like Dwight Freeney, who played for you in the latter years of his career, but for the Colts, for those first years of his career with Indianapolis, he was elite. Again, one of the better Colts of all time. And I mean, it's just, again, not a situation where, yeah, the Lions aren't going to be a better team all of a sudden because of Freeney, but it's certainly a much better player to have for your franchise. And I mean, certainly the right pick in this. Indianapolis got a steal with him in 11. So Dwight Freeney would have been very good for these Lions, who needed pass rush badly at the time. And of course, I'm also going off of needs. I'm not just going off of who was the best players available. These are of course needs as well. And the Lions needed pass rush as well as quarterback. Obviously, they sucked. I think there's a much better player here with Dwight Freeney than Joey Harrington. Moving on to the fourth pick, we have the Bills picking up James Harrison, who actually went undrafted. This is the guy that had that big Super Bowl interception return, and he just had a very good career for Pittsburgh despite being undrafted. Arguably, in my opinion, the greatest undrafted player of all time. Went to Kent State, and obviously wasn't a college standout. So, his NFL success was just pretty much unpredictable. And for the Bills, I mean, there's an argument whether Harrison is better than Dwight Freeney. I don't think there's an argument over Peppers, but there's an argument over Freeney. The thing is for me, though, is that if you look at the Bills, the Lions, and the Panthers, all three ran 4-3 defenses at the time, as that was the popular defense in the NFL. So with a guy like James Harrison, who is much more of that stand-up outside guy, and he could play linebacker, but he's definitely more of that outside linebacker. I think he works the best with the Bills here, mainly as more of that stand-up edge rusher rather than the hand-in-the-dirt guys like Peppers and Freeney, which just fit a bit better with the Lions and the I keep forgetting the Panthers for some reason. I just think they work better with them. So Harrison had a great career with the Steelers, and I mean, again, just a great player, easily one of the best players of this class. I just think he kind of goes behind Freeney and Peppers just because of the nature of the defense, how defense was ran in the NFL. By most teams, the Steelers were definitely like barely just. I mean, 3-4 defense has been around for a little bit before this, but the Steelers were really one of the only teams using it the way they did. So with the Bills, you're still getting an elite edge rusher here who maybe would not have as quite a good career, but again, still one of the best players in this class. And really, it's because after the fourth pick, which I mean, Mike Williams. I mean, I don't know if there's too much to talk about with Mike Williams. The dude just was quite a bust. He just did not end up being good in the NFL. But, it's kind of after these first four picks that the draft does fall off. There is still some great talent in the rest of this draft. It's just not on the same level as these first four guys. And that's not to say that Roy Williams was a bad safety. I mean, safety being picked in the top 5 is great, obviously, especially if you're the second safety off the board. I mean, again, just not quite on the same level as those first four guys, but Roy Williams was still a very good safety for the Cowboys with the time he was there. He was still a solid player at Oklahoma, and I think, at the time, Chargers are looking for secondary help, and Quentin Jammer just didn't end up being quite the player they wanted. In my opinion, still, a top 30 player from the class, just not number 5 overall type player. Roy Williams was that good. I think he would have been a great addition to that secondary and really could have helped the Chargers, continuing to try to make that run at the Super Bowl that they were aiming for at the time, which would start coming with guys like LaDainian Tomlinson and, Phillip Rivers, Antonio Gates, and just would have been another great player to add to that team for those runs that would come. Moving on to the 6th pick, we have the Cowboys, who would trade back to number 8, which, by the way, I'm also keeping the pre-draft order, so, like, no draft day trades. So Cowboys would move down to 8 and get a guy like Roy Williams, which, as we just discussed, was a great pickup. He was a very good safety for the Cowboys. With him off the board, however, I'm instead going to have them taking Bart Scott, who also went undrafted. In fact, I mean, this might be, maybe the best undrafted class of all time. And Bart Scott, who went to Southern Illinois, again, just obviously not that much of a great college player, just did not get the attention of scouts and went on to have a very, very good and long career with the Ravens. Definitely was a big part of, their kind of, in the latter years of his career, was a big part of their Super Bowl team, but even before that, just added some great things, and especially in some of Baltimore's greatest years, had some Defensive Player of the Year-like performances. They miss out on a good safety like Roy Williams, but you're getting a really good linebacker as well with Bart Scott, so the Cowboys would have been getting themselves another good player. Then moving on to pick number 7, we have Albert Haynesworth going to the Vikings, moving up about 8 spots, despite not having the greatest end to his career. And then obviously, Haynesworth known most notably for the head stomp, definitely someone that was not able to control his emotions. However, if you take aside the fact that he was not able to control his emotions, Albert Haynesworth was one of the most dominant players in the league for like his first 4 years of his career. Now, I think what really happened is just once he got paid, he just kind of stopped caring, and that's just kind of the person he was, But for those first 4 years, Albert Haynesworth, again, was a Defensive Player of the Year type guy, like almost every single year those first 4 years. And who knows, maybe in this universe, once he gets paid, he doesn't, just stop caring really. And I definitely think he's a better pick than Bryant McKinnie, because while McKinnie definitely lasted longer in the NFL than Haynesworth, he also just never was really like an elite tackle. He had 1 Pro Bowl year. Just outside of that, just not anything that's like, I don't think pick number 7 worthy. So yeah, with Haynesworth, maybe you're only getting him for a good 4 or 5 years, but those 4 or 5 years you're going to get from him are elite, and I think worth over some of the other players in this class that, yeah, they were solid players, but they just were never on the same level that Haynesworth was for the first few years of his career. So for me, I think he would have been worth the pick. Then at number 8, we have the Chiefs taking um, Albert Haynesworth's partner from Tennessee and John Henderson, who was taken just a pick later by Jacksonville. And, for the Chiefs, John Henderson is not the most flashy player by any means, but he is a huge upgrade over Ryan Sims. I mean, I had a tough time finding a good picture of Ryan Sims. I mean, that just really shows you how much of a bust that this guy was. And the fact that he was, taken over guys like Henderson and, Haynesworth. I mean, yeah, again, not the flashiest pick. I mean, me personally, like as a person, John Henderson was a great guy. I love the clip where he's in the locker room before the game and he has this, like, compared to him at least, this small little dude, like one of the training staff members, slapping him before a game, and he's just sitting there and just shouting like, "No, I need you to slap me harder," because that's the type of guy he was. He wanted to be pumped up, and he gave it his all on the field. Just, yeah, was not the same elite guy as like a Haynesworth. Didn't deliver always elite play, but he was around for a while. It was a very solid player on not the best team in Jacksonville. So at the very least, it's a very good upgrade over Sims. But who knows? Maybe the Chiefs get themselves something with Henderson, who I think would have been worth the pick. Then at number 9, we have the Jaguars, who, like we just discussed, took John Henderson. With him off the board now, they are going to take a pretty good tight end and easily the best receiver out of this class in Jeremy Shockey, who would go on to have a very good career with the Giants. The guy was just great at tight end. I don't know what else much there is to say besides that. He was a great contributor to the team for years. Just was statistically one of the best tight ends for a while there in the 2000s. And for the Jaguars here, like, again, it's not a player that's going to, like, a tight end's not going to, like, elevate you. But it was certainly a great weapon to give. Who would have been the quarterback? I don't think Mark Brunell. If it was Mark Brunell, he'd be in like the later years of his career. But either way, you were giving whoever your quarterback was at the time a good tight end, and honestly, one of the better tight ends of all time with Jeremy Shockey. So I think it would have been a solid pick here for the Jaguars. Then at pick number 10, we have the Bengals, who did take Levi Jones. I've heard Levy, actually, it might be Levy Jones, but Levi Jones, who, again, just did not work out in the NFL. He was a solid starter for, a few years. He was around for longer than a few years, but he wasn't that good when he did start. You could have had some more protection, and I thought about Bryant McKinney here, who you're going to see later actually takes a pretty big fall in this draft. But in the end of the day, I took Sheldon Brown because the Bengals were a team that just needed help on a lot of different areas in their team, and secondary was one of them. Sheldon Brown, and by the way, you're going to see a lot of Eagles draft picks in here. Like, this was a phenomenal draft by Philadelphia. Sheldon Brown, taken in the second round by Philadelphia, went on to have a very good career, and to be honest, underrated career for the Eagles. I think he made like one Pro Bowl his entire career, but I don't know how that happened because it seems like he was one of those guys where he just was very good but always underrated. And I think for a team like the Bengals that could have used someone like him would have been a great pickup, and for me, definitely a better pick than Levy Jones. So Sheldon Brown had a very solid underrated career. I think would have been a good fit for the Bengals. Then at number 11, the Colts took Dwight Freeney, who is far off the board at this point. So instead, we're going to be giving him Ryan Clark, who was actually an undrafted free agent to the Giants. Really didn't play much for the Giants, though. He really more popped off in his career once he went to the Redskins. And this guy had a really good career. Maybe a bit more of like a fan favorite guy that, like, Redskins fans, now Washington fans are going to know who this guy is. Maybe not as many you do know who he is, but he was a pretty good safety for a few years in the NFL. And definitely at one point, he was arguably like a top 3, top 2 safety in the NFL. Didn't have the most consistent or longest career, but he had a pretty solid career, and I think would have been a solid pickup for the Colts. Would have fit really nicely with them. Yeah, it's not Dwight Freeney, but that was such a great pick that he's far off the board by this point, so you do get yourself a very solid safety with Ryan Clark. Moving on to number 12, we have the Cardinals, who had a decent amount of needs at the time. One need that they had that was really under the radar was running back. I mean, it wasn't under the radar necessarily. It's just the fact that, even in 2002, I think to some degree, people must have been aware that running back was one of the lesser valued positions, even if they were valued more than they are today. And that's mainly why I have him going up here with Brian Westbrook, because, again, they needed a running back. Over Wendell Bryant, who Like, this is the best picture I could find was his his like in uniform mugshot type picture. Westbrook would go on to be another one of those late Philadelphia picks where he just had a very good career. Was one of the biggest reasons that they actually made the Super Bowl back in like 2004 or whatever. Westbrook had a very good start to his career. He kind of cooled off towards the end, but still great start to the career. So for a team like the Cardinals, like, yeah, maybe wouldn't benefit them as much in short term, but they really did need a running back. And who knows, maybe getting that running game going would have helped them make it to a Super Bowl before they had to face the Steelers that one year. So for me, it's definitely upgrade over Bryant. They needed a running back, and Westbrook would go on to have a pretty good career with the Eagles. So I think he's a worthy pick here. Moving on to 13, we have the Saints picking Aaron Campman, who originally was a fifth round pick by the Packers. Yeah, he wasn't quite on the same level of Freeney, Peppers, those guys, Harrison, but he was still a solid player for years in Green Bay, and yeah, just I think he was a solid player. I think that's enough for this pick. The Saints needed some pass rush help. They actually took Dante Stallworth, who, I mean, he was never anything special, but then DUI that killed somebody. I mean, it's just he didn't have the best career, and definitely just didn't have the most fortunate events happen to him. With Campman, I think you get an upgrade, just someone that maybe it's less of a need than receiver was for the Saints at the time, but Campman still would have been a very solid contributor to that defense and would have helped you, I think, long term a lot better than Stallworth did. So I think Campman makes sense here over Stallworth. Number 14, we have the Titans taking Andre Garode. I don't know if it's Garode or Garode. Either way, dude was a monster. In real life, they did take Albert Hainsworth after trading back a pick. With him far off the board at this point, Andre Garade was a really, really good guard for the Cowboys, actually. Fell to the second round where Dallas took him, and it was a great opportunity because the dude went on to have a long and successful career. I don't think he's as valuable as maybe some of these other players. Like, yeah, I mean, normally, if I'm a team with a ton of needs, I'm taking Garode over guys like probably Westbrook, right? But with just in terms of needs, the Titans were the first team that really did have like an offensive line need, and Garate would have been a great pickup for a team that needed offensive line help. Again, just a long and successful career. Was valued both Pro Bowl like and All Pro, so just would have been a great pickup for the Titans. Number 15, we have the Giants, who would have taken Jeremy Shockey after moving up a pick for him. He's off the board at this point, and I thought about it. There were some other needs on the team, but I thought Javon Walker is worthy of this pick. He didn't have like the best career or anything. He was solid for the Packers. In fact, he started out really nicely and had some great years in New York, I actually believe. But he had a solid career. I think it's worth the pick for the Giants. You needed a guy like Shockey to be a target, obviously, for that Giants offense. And I think it's important to get another one here. Walker, again, did have some pretty good years to his career. And he was taken by the Packers later, who I think did get a pretty nice player in him, but he gets picked a little bit higher in this redraft. Number 16, we have the Browns taking Clinton Portis, who was originally taken by Denver in the second round. The Browns were another team similar to the Cardinals where they desperately needed running back help. They needed it bad. And Clinton Portis was a really good running back for the time he was in the league. I think Brian Westbrook, fit a bit better with the Cardinals. Clinton Portis, on the other hand, though, he wasn't as great of like a receiving back, but the dude was a runner. In fact, he was actually up there with the likes of like LaDainian Tomlinson for a good, 4 or 5 years there, mainly with Washington. But he also had a very solid start to his career with Denver as well. So, if you're still going to stick with running back here, I definitely think that Clinton Portis is a huge upgrade over William Green. You can argue he should go in front of Westbrook, but I think I like the idea of Portis on the Browns. So he would have helped them out tremendously and would have been a great pickup for the Browns. And then moving on to the Falcons at 17, they would take a running back in TJ Duckett, moving down a spot. I'm going to be honest, I've never heard of TJ Duckett before. I've never heard of this guy. And apparently didn't work out, and that's probably why I haven't heard of him. I don't have them taking a running back, however, though. I do have them taking a cornerback in Lito Shepherd, another Philadelphia draft pick. This guy was taken a bit higher, and obviously, based on the fact that he went earlier, I would take Sheldon Brown over Lito Shepherd. Lito Shepherd still had a very solid career for the Eagles and helped create a pretty good duo there. So with the Falcons, I mean, I think he would have helped, obviously would help the defense. That's why they're drafting him. But I just think overall, like, another one of those more underrated guys that really I think should maybe be at least a bit more talked about. But I think he could have made a decent duo with, a guy like Ray Buchanan. Wouldn't have been the best player in the world, but certainly could have been a good one for the Falcons, who could have just used it. Moving on to pick 18, we have the Redskins at the time picking LaCharles Bentley. Now, this is a strange pick because in real life, this is a weird pick all around. In real life, they would trade down to pick number 32 and draft a quarterback by the name of Patrick Ramsey, who did not work out. LaCharles Bentley in real life was taken in the second round by the Saints. And it's weird the way his career played out because for the first 3-4 years of his career, the dude was amazing. He was arguably one of the best centers in the league and was well on pace to maybe become the best center in the league. Unfortunately, he suffered a freak leg injury, which pretty much ended his career. So in this universe, I mean, I kind of already went off the idea of like, well, maybe Albert Haynesworth doesn't, stop playing basically after his contract. In this universe, maybe LaCharles Bentley doesn't have like a career-ending leg injury. And at that point, maybe he's worth even more than the 18th pick because the dude really was that good. And so for the team like the Redskins, which really needed offensive line help at the time, even if it is for the short term, LaCharles Bentley will be a great addition. But if he does play past the long term too, who knows? Maybe this guy goes down as one of the better interior linemen of all time. Honestly, he was that good in the time he did play. So for the Redskins, I think it would have been a worthwhile bet. Then moving on to number 19, we have the Broncos, who in real life took a wide receiver by the name of Ashley Laley. I'm a Broncos fan, and I've never even heard of this guy. In real life, Will Witherspoon I keep wanting to say Weatherspoon for some reason. It's Witherspoon. Would be taken in the third round by the Panthers. He would go on to have a pretty long, successful career. Really more of a stat guy, but also was another reason, that helped that Carolina defense help the Panthers to the Super Bowl in 2003. He was a solid player. I think that's pretty much what you're getting at this point in the draft is you're getting a lot of solid guys. And with Witherspoon, I mean, he's a linebacker. The Broncos defense needed some upgrading at the time, and Witherspoon would have given you a nice, at the very least, some nice stats for that time. For a team that just wasn't. I mean, they were only 3 years off of Elway retiring, so you weren't going to be making any noise for at least a couple more years. With a guy like Witherspoon, who did kind of excel more in the middle of his career, could have made some nice impacts for that Denver team. Moving on to number 20, we have the Seahawks taking Brett Kiesel out of BYU, who is the latest actually drafted player in this class in the 7th round. Originally, the Seahawks would trade down and take a tight end by the name of Jeremy Stevens. Never heard of him. Brett Kiesel, on the other hand, would go on to have, one of the better long-term careers of any player in this draft, that isn't like the top 5-6 guys. Yeah, he's not not an elite player, not on the same level of like a Freeney, a Harrison, not even a Campman in my opinion, but he did have a pretty nice long career and one thing he always brought was consistency. Yeah, he may have never been the elite pass rusher. He wasn't ever like the all-pro, but he was consistent for a good 10 years there with the Steelers. So I think it would have been a very worthwhile addition for the Seahawks, who needed some pass rush badly at the time. So I think Brett Kiesel would have been a nice pick for the Seahawks. Then at number 21, we have the Raiders, who are going to stay put this time instead of trading up for Phillip Buchanan, who would end up being, I don't know if he's a bad bust, but definitely, did not have the best career. Quentin Jammer, on the other hand, would go on to have a pretty solid career. Like I said at the beginning of the video, wasn't worth the number 5 pick from the then San Diego Chargers. But for the Raiders to stay here, not trade up and get a corner that was drafted higher and still ended up being better than the guy they actually took, I think is pretty good for the Raiders here. Again, Jammer was never like the best corner ever, but he was a solid starter for, the Chargers, the Broncos, and I think would have been a great pickup here for the Raiders, especially over Buchanan. Then at number 22, we have the Jets getting a pretty big upgrade at pass rusher, moving from Brian Thomas, who just never did anything, to Charles Grant. Charles Grant would be taken a few picks later by the Saints, and that was a pretty good pickup because had one of the longer careers of these guys. And the thing with him is that, yeah, he had a longer career, but he was much more inconsistent, especially towards the beginning of his career. Really took off more in that middle to like early late stage of his career. Early late is a term now. He was a guy that, he was just inconsistent. He had a good, solid, long career, just a bit inconsistent. But the years that he was good, he was good. I mean, I think he had 2 or 3 double-digit sack years, but he also had years where he had like 1 or 2 sacks. And he wasn't the most elite edge rusher to where he's mattering all that much besides the sacks. So that's why he does fall below a lot of other edge rushers in this class. Still would have been an extremely good advantage and upgrade over Brian Thomas, who just really never did anything for the Jets. So this guy would have been a very good pickup for New York. Number 23, the Raiders are up again, and instead of taking Napoleon Harris, who I've never heard of, they pick a Ken Ayodele, I think is how you say his name, who went on to have a pretty good career for Jacksonville. Had a nice 7-8 year career, was a pretty good stat pattern, but I think also served a pretty good purpose outside of just stats. Did make a nice, some nice plays for the Jaguars. And just again, another one of these more underrated guys from this class that, yeah, you're not going to hear, his name that much, but I think would have served a solid career in, at the time, Oakland. Then at number 24, the Ravens get a replacement for Ed Reed. Obviously, Chris Hope is not on the same level as Ed Reed. That's hard to do. Chris Hope, though, was still a very good safety in my opinion. The fact that the best picture I could find of him was a signed photograph is a little disrespectful because this guy was actually a pretty good safety. He played on a Steelers defense that, yeah, they had a lot of pieces around them, so he was definitely, not known as well. He wasn't as big of a piece as, like, some of the other guys, but he was still a solid safety. So I think the fact that, I don't think he ever made a Pro Bowl. I can't find a proper, good quality picture of him online. For how good of a guy he was, I think is a little weird. Again, just another one of those more underrated guys from this class that people aren't going to know off the top of their head because, of course, these guys played 10 to 20 years ago. But Chris Hope, while he's not Ed Reed, would have still been a solid safety replacement for the Ravens. Number 25, we have the Saints, who earlier originally took Dante Stallworth. They instead picked up a different guy, who I already forgot for some reason. Either way, they picked up a different player, and instead this time are going to get their receiver that they probably would have wanted earlier in Deion Branch. Yeah, Branch, I mean, at least with Dante Stallworth, he had a few, near 1,000-yard receiving seasons. I think Deion Branch only ever got close to 1,000 yards, like, once in his career. And the obvious highlight of his career is the Super Bowl MVP. Outside of that, no, he wasn't the best receiver in the world. But for a Saints team that was still pretty good, and we're a few pieces away from really making runs. They still did need a receiver at the time, and Deion Branch could have been a pretty solid receiver for the Saints, which I am curious now as to who they did pick earlier. I'm forgetting for some reason. Okay, Aaron Campman. I was thinking for myself, Aaron Campman, right? But I think they do have a pretty solid class here in the end, though, with Campman. Charles Grant, we already discussed he's a pretty good player. Probably would have redrafted him to New Orleans. If they'd taken a receiver earlier and stuff. But in this case, Grant's already off the board. They still need a receiver, and Branch could have been a solid player. He was a decently good steal for the Patriots near the end of the second round. Moving on to number 26, we have the Eagles, who have had a lot of their old draft picks taken away in this. And I think like 4 players ended up getting picked that were originally picked by the Eagles before the Eagles have even picked in this draft. Which for them, when you were already picking at 26 and you had an insane draft class like that, good on you. I mean, big reason why they made the Super Bowl soon after. In this case, Lito Shepherd's already off the board. They're not able to pick Sheldon Brown. They can't pick Brian Westbrook. None of those guys. So instead, they're going to get themselves a pretty good linebacker here in Larry Foote. The Steelers, the other team that also had a very good draft this year. Larry Foote, a solid guy that just was around for a while, had some really solid stats, was definitely a contributor to that team for years to come. I think just for the Eagles, when you need something at this point, because all your draft picks have been taken, Larry Foote's not nothing. He certainly was still a good linebacker, just not on par as some of the other guys they got from this class, but still a great pickup for the Eagles. Number 27, the 49ers originally would take Mike Rumpf, who I've never heard of in my life. And they're going to instead take Michael Lewis, who another one of these Philadelphia draft picks, but also another one of these really underrated players. Now, he didn't do anything for Philadelphia, though, so it's not as much as like the other four guys where, they took him and they just ended up being such great picks for him. No, Michael Lewis didn't do anything for the Eagles, really. He really did more when he moved to like the 49ers and stuff. So it's kind of where he's known a bit more anyways. But either way, Michael Lewis was still a pretty good safety, and I mean, he did a few other, he was fine. He was fine for the Eagles, did, I think, better things elsewhere. And I think he was just a solid, underrated safety that would have been a pretty good pickup for the 49ers, who needed secondary help at the time. Then number 28, and I said it, but Bryant McKinnie suffers a pretty big drop here. And really, I think the reason for that is just because I was struggling with two things mainly. The fact that, you know, I just think at the time I would prefer to have those elite players, even if it is more short term. And, moving into like the second half of this draft, that's when you really get into more of the, maybe the guys who had like longer careers, but they were just inconsistent or they were never elite. And that's the exact case with Bryant McKinnie, where he had a long, solid career with the Vikings. He had a Pro Bowl year, but he was just never elite. He was never in that top tier of offensive linemen. And I think that's ultimately what besides the fact that I just struggled finding teams who needed tackle help that badly, I think that's why he ultimately suffers a loss here. And even the Packers aren't a team that really needed tackle help at the time. It's just weird, but it seems like that many teams really just didn't, or they just had bigger needs. So that's mainly the reason why McKinnie falls here. I think he would start for the Packers, and he would go on to probably have a nice, solid, long career with the Packers. I don't think he was worth the seventh pick, and certainly could go higher than this. I just don't think there was a team that really fit him up until this point. And even like I said, the Packers, I don't even think are the best fit in the world. They're getting, I think maybe a bit of an upgrade over Javon Walker, who he obviously goes much earlier. It's just that there was a bigger need for him. And I think overall, like I said, it's just with a guy like McKinnie, he was never elite. Walker at least had some great years. McKinnie is just, he suffers a drop because of that, unfortunately. Number 29, we have the Bears taking Maaki Kameatu, is how I'm going to say it, probably wrong. Another undrafted player from this class. He would go on to have, he'd really just sit around with Baltimore first couple years, had a really good breakout year, and then would go to play, who did he play with after that? Was it it was the Panthers. Panthers or Bills. It was one of the two. I think it was Buffalo that he went to play with after. It was one of those teams, and he went to go play with them, and he really did start to play really well after that. And I think well enough to deserve a spot here over a guy like Mark Colombo, another one of the big tackle misses from this class. Maybe if I think McKinnie might have been a bit more of a sensible pick if he did fall here, but I think the Packers steal him right before the Bears can. Either way, though, Kamiatu, again, I think that's how you say it, would have been a really solid player for the Bears. Maybe it would have taken a couple years for him to get going, but he would have been a pretty solid interior guy for Chicago. Number 30, the Steelers. They're not here. None of their players that they took are here for them to take, and Larry Foote's not here, and nobody else. So in real life, they took Kendall Simmons, who would go on to have a pretty lackluster career with the Steelers. Instead, they're going to pick up Scott Fajita. Is it Fajita or Fajita? I think it's Fajita. But either way, they would pick up Scott, who was another one of those underrated radar guys taken in the fifth round by Kansas City. And another one of those guys where he would just go on to have a pretty long, solid career. There's an argument that he could be picking above, I just said picking again. There's an argument that he could be taken above guys like Larry Foote and stuff. I have him dropping here. I think he fits a bit better with the Steelers than he would have with the Eagles. Either way, you can switch them out. They would have both gone on to have long, solid careers. And so, it's a solid pickup for both teams. I couldn't really find a picture of him in a Chiefs jersey for some reason, even though he had a really solid career with them. I can only find a decent quality image from the Browns. So, but yeah, so Fajita to the Steelers. Number 31, we have the Rams, who needed really just kind of like edge and linebacker help. In real life, they would take Robert Thomas, who just never did anything for them. It really does show, especially the fact that the best picture I could find is of a football card. Whereas Alex Brown would go on to have a pretty solid career with the Bears. Another one of the under-radar guys, went in the 4th round, and would just go on to have a really solid career. Yeah, he could be taken over a few other edge rushers in this class, but similar case, just had a solid career, except Alex Brown, a bit more of a shorter career. He wasn't the most consistent, but he was a solid pickup and would have definitely been an upgrade over Thomas. A solid pickup for the Rams here at 31. And then last but not least, we have the Patriots, fresh off their Super Bowl win with Tom Brady. Last pick in the draft, they would move up to 21 to pick a tight end by the name of Daniel Graham, who I feel like I've maybe heard of before. Either way, did not turn out. Instead, they're going to take Brandon Moore, another undrafted player, this time a guard who went to the Jets, who just again would go on to have a nice, long, solid career. Was never the best in the league. I don't think he ever made a Pro Bowl, but he would have been a solid guard for the Patriots. They had an old guard. There's not a lot of teams, a lot of needs for a team like the Patriots. Obviously, fresh off a Super Bowl, they had an old guard. Brandon Moore could have taken over, because that was really what happened with Moore. Was he was more of like a fine guard, and then really found his way as more of like a center later on in his career. Or not a center. He just found his way as more of a guard, but like later in his career. And so, I think that would have worked out fine, for the Patriots. You let that guard play his last years, Moore steps in, and then he probably plays good because that's how it went in real life. Who knows? It's all a redraft. It's just for fun. It's just looking back 20 years later to see how these guys panned out, who should have been taken, who shouldn't have, what order, what needs, what teams. 20 years later. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this, though. If you got any, opinions, or, did I miss somebody that should have been taken? Did I get somebody wrong? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, I didn't see a 2002 redraft, so I thought it might be fun. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.